Today, I'm going to be answering all of your questions. So yeah, about a month ago we did the first Q&A video, and it went really well. People sent in loads and loads of questions, and I think if people still have stuff to ask us, then we'd like to make this a semi-regular thing if we can. Not only because I think, well, a lot of people obviously want to know about pedals and what's coming up and how we got started and whatever, but I think they also want to know a lot more about us as people, and I think that's fine, and I'm perfectly happy to answer pretty much anything. So, because obviously you want to know who you're buying from, and people, you want to support people that you believe in and whatever. So if it helps give people more context as to who we are, then that's great. So let's go. Pete Millis asks, what's your inspiration and thought process when designing and building your pedals? Well, I think obviously this depends on what the pedal is, and I think for a lot of our drives and fuzzes, we predominantly focus on, especially in the case of like the American Geek and the Siva, it was like, well, we really like the big muff circuit, but obviously in its original format it has a very kind of fixed sound and doesn't really work for everyone depending on what their setup is. So I think the thing for us was to take those kinds of circuits and how do we make them as versatile and as flexible as possible, so that it doesn't matter whether you're playing into a Fender amp or an Orange amp or a Marshall, it doesn't matter if you're using a Les Paul or a Strat or a Tele or a Gretsch, you can pretty much get a decent sound one way or another, with all the parameters that you can adjust. And that was really the kind of thing that we wanted to focus on. And then with the digital side of things, especially when we were like developing the Junipero, what we wanted to do from the off was create a framework that allowed us to then, in the future, release like a delay and a reverb and maybe some other bits and pieces. Aaron Lee asks, least and favourite part of owning a pedal company and why? I definitely think my favourite part would be the kind of confidence that I've gained from owning Xander. Only really because, so I'm quite introverted by nature, and owning Xander has kind of forced me into some situations that on paper I wouldn't be very comfortable with, like with the shows and having to demo to people and talking to the public and dealing with all that kind of stuff. And it's allowed me to gain that kind of self-confidence. And especially now, because like when I first started, I would have never dreamt of getting on camera and doing stuff like this that goes out to however many people. So for me, it's been, on a personal level, it's been nice kind of gaining that confidence. Least favourite part, I think, well, because obviously I work full-time on top of Xander, so sometimes it can be a bit of a slog to obviously finish a full day's work and then think, oh no, I've got to build like 20 boards, or I've got to do a load of invoicing, or I need to work on some design stuff, or whatever it might be. That is tiring, and there are some days where it does get on top of you, especially if you're having like a dry spell where I've not really sold much in the last couple of weeks or whatever. But where you've got those valleys, you also have the peaks as well, so it balances itself out. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said there weren't some days where it is a little bit tough. Andy Barker asks, you pay tribute to many classic fuzz circuits with the signature Xander twists and improvements. Do you think you'll apply this approach to classic overdrive circuits? Yes, I do. The plan is that once we've got the new format stuff ready, then I can start looking at some overdrive stuff. There are a few circuits, I won't mention any, I won't give anything away just yet. There are a few circuits that I think that we'd like to take a look at, obviously, because I know at the moment a lot of our stuff is pretty heavily fuzz based, especially now that we're retiring the Avalanche. Really, we've only got the surplus and the Cranium that will be left. But going forward, we definitely want to start looking into some more overdrive circuits. Andy Barker also asks, is the Junipero a format you plan to expand? A delay version would be killer. Yes, in short, I won't give too much away, but I would watch this space, as there will definitely be some more stuff coming in that format fairly soon. Stefan Carlson asks, what is the ballpark planned release schedule for the forthcoming compact edition? So yeah, he's talking about the smaller pedals that we're moving over to. where everything's kind of being shrunk down into a smaller format. As of recording this, the Cyclone and Sono are very, very, very close to being done, and I think those two will come out first because they follow the same kind of template in terms of like layout. And then all the other ones, they also all follow the same layout with like the 6 pots and the 1 rotary switch for the clipping diode. So what we've done is try to design a master board that holds all of the pots and the switches and stuff like that, all the stuff that's similar, and then it will be basically like fitted on, the circuit will kind of fit onto a second board that kind of attaches in, and that's the kind of method that we're working for this new stuff, which obviously has a little bit more of an implication in terms of timelines, but once it's there, it means it just allows tons of flexibility and ease of releasing new pedals once that's ready. So I'm hoping, if everything goes to plan, maybe September, October this year. Nick Wyatt says, any plans for a fuzz face type pedal with switchable transistors? Well, transistors are a bit of a funny one in terms of switching. Diodes are much easier to switch, whereas transistors, there's a bit more involved in that. Really, I mean, the Cyclone obviously has its basis in a fuzz factory, which is kind of where it initially started, and before we kind of really pulled it apart and kind of changed it into its own thing. And then obviously the fuzz factory kind of has its roots in a fuzz face, so it's kind of there. It's almost just like a fuzz face on steroids with 8 knobs. But yeah, no immediate plans to do exactly that, because the issue you have with swapping out transistors is they have to be rebiased depending on what kind of transistor you're using and things like that, so it all becomes a bit of a mess. Gavin O'Driscoll says, what background/qualifications have you got in electronics? What would be a good way to jump in? I would like to become a pedal builder and want to learn. I'm probably not the best person to ask because I don't actually have any electronics background whatsoever. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I really kind of learned how to do a lot of pedals, but I learned how to solder by soldering on guitars. If you've watched the second episode of our story time where we go into the history, I kind of go into that kind of stuff of how I got started. So yeah, I learned to solder that way. I built a couple of DIY kits, and then I started looking into tag board and Vero board builds on the internet, and slowly I kind of learned the building blocks of how some basic overdrives and fuzzes work, and that's really kind of how I got into it. I don't really have any specific tips other than just muck about, like maybe build a couple of DIY kits, start looking up schematics of circuits that you like, and then compare them to like a Vero board build so you can kind of see where things are connecting, because learning to read a schematic is kind of a big stepping stone as well. If you just kind of think of it as like parts with cables connecting the parts, that kind of makes it a lot easier. It was the way I visualized it at first. My approach to a lot of when I'm developing like a new product will be like, if I know a circuit that I want to base something on, okay, let's build it and get it working, and then let's pull it apart and see what changing certain bits does. And after a while you start to learn that going into it, you know that, oh, if I change this part, or if I put that part on a pot so that it's variable, then that part's gonna increase the bass, or it's going to increase the gain, or it's going to throw the bias of that transistor off, or anything. Like, you kind of learn those bits as you go along. But yeah, my advice would be definitely get a couple of kits, practice some soldering, and then take it from there. Destroying Amps Demos asks, why is Destroying Amps Demos so cool? I don't know, you have a really cool style, you've demoed some stuff for me. Everyone should go and check out Destroying Amps Demos. I realised that he's just tricked me into doing a free plug for him. But yeah, he's a cool guy. He does some good stuff. If you're into kind of weird, experimental, shoegazy, droney stuff, he's your guy. Trevor Newman asks, if you were a guitar pedal, what would you be? I'm trying to think of all the rude pedals that have been released through the years to try and think of something funny. I think a pedal called Brown Amplification have just released a pedal called the Protein, which I think is maybe somewhat applicable to me. Trevor Newman also asks, what is your favourite delay pedal and why? As of late, well, I guess this is maybe a couple of years old now, but I really liked the Diode Rubberneck. That was a really, really cool pedal. I'm a big fan of analog delay, and with that one, with the effects loop and all the other bits that it had going on, it seemed to sound really good. I've unfortunately never had the chance to play one in real life, but from what I've heard, that sounds really good. Oh, this is a long one. Lex Coop Miners asks, Alex, just a thought. I read your blog about clipping diodes, and he's referring to a blog post that I wrote for Boost Guitar Pedal. You should check it out if you're interested in clipping diodes and how they work. That's the article for you. And the stuff about symmetrical versus asymmetrical clipping caught my eye, but here's my idea. What happens when you use an even number of diodes in series but with different forward voltage and in another order? For example, on one side silicon into germanium and on the other germanium into silicon. Would that be symmetrical, asymmetrical, with the best of both worlds? No, so it doesn't really work like that. What happens when diodes are put in series is that their forward voltage adds up. So if you've got a silicon diode that's its forward voltage is 1.5 and you've got a germanium diode and its forward voltage is 0.5, then on that side you've got a forward voltage of 2, and if it's put the other way, it doesn't matter what order they're in. If they're in series, a big part of what matters when you're using diodes for clipping is the forward voltage, because that effectively sets the clipping threshold. So if you've got the same diodes on each side, it doesn't matter what order they're in, that's still symmetrical clipping. Lex also asks, with all the great options for your guitar pedals, will there be a bass pedal with all of those options? Don't get me wrong, the Sono is great, but the level of options to switch between different sounds on the other pedals is just next level. So I'm assuming he means, will there be a bass pedal that has the clipping rotary on it? And at the moment, I mean, no immediate plans, but I'm not completely adverse to the idea. A lot of our pedals sound pretty good on bass anyway, in particular the American Geek, because that has just a ton of low end. But yeah, absolutely, there's no reason why we couldn't release a bass specific overdrive pedal. Kenny McKeown asks, maybe a bit tech heavy, but are there huge differences in building digital pedals versus analog? Yes, when it comes to the fact that with digital pedals you actually have to code the effects and any of the controls and stuff like that. It involves a lot of, almost like you're building a website, for example. Obviously it's a different coding language, but you're still coding something, telling it what to do, turning all those ones and zeros into nice effects on the other side. When it comes to actually building, like physically building the pedal, no, not really, because at the end of the day there's still parts that still need to be soldered to a PCB, and microchips that you have to program either at the beginning or at the end. They still manifest themselves in physical things that have to be soldered. So actually building the pedal, no, but in terms of developing and having to upload software and stuff like that, that's a little extra step that you need to do at the end, yeah. Daniel J asks, what advice would you give to anyone looking to start a small pedal company? Don't. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, the way I can only really say how we started, and I, like I've mentioned before, just kind of started by messing around with bits and pieces. I have some theory that I've kind of gained along the way, but a lot of my knowledge was learnt by just mucking around with circuits and seeing what happens. You're very unlikely to get a nasty shock from a 9-volt circuit, which is why I don't mess around with amps, because they have lethal voltages in them. Taylor Watterson asks, do you think cucumbers taste better pickled? Yes, I do. Cucumbers on their own are pretty boring. I don't know if there's anything that wouldn't be better pickled. Taylor also asks, if you could have been born in a different country, where would you have chosen? It's a toss-up, really. I think on one hand, maybe somewhere in Scandinavia, because I think a lot of those countries have got their way of living pretty nailed down, but the only thing that really stops me from wanting to live in Scandinavia is the freezing cold winters. And then the other one would probably just be the USA, because as much as it looks like a slightly volatile place to live at the moment, I think there are still a lot of good people that want to do a lot of good, and I think eventually I'm not a religious man, but I pray that it all levels itself out and calms down eventually. Daniel Worley asks, if you could build a combination of any separate pedals into a singular multi-effects unit, what pedals would you build into it? I'd like to know your answers for both Xander pedals and for any other brand. I think if I was going to do a multi-effects unit, I'd probably go for like an all-in-one dirt pedal. So probably the Surplus, from us, the Surplus, the Cranium, and maybe the American Geek or the Seaver. So you've kind of got light drive, distortion, and then like a heavy distortion / fuzz, because I think that would cover most of my needs. If I was looking at pedals from other brands, I do like a modulation, delay, reverb combo, because that's kind of the other half. Other than like the kind of grungy, shoegazy, distorted stuff that I play, I do like that kind of ambient, clean stuff as well. So I think maybe for the delay, we go for the Diode Rubberneck, which I've already mentioned. For the reverb, maybe the Dr. Scientist Atmosphere, because that looks really cool. And then I think for the modulation, maybe the Cooper Effects Generation Loss, which is like a weird vibrato, chorus, lo-fi kind of thing. I think that would cover 90% of my ambient needs. Daniel also asks, who would win in a fistfight between Leo Fender, Les Paul, Joe Bonamassa and Kid Rock? Well, I know nothing about Joe Bonamassa, and I don't really care to. Leo Fender and Les Paul, I've only ever really seen pictures of them as like old guys, so I can't really picture them any other way other than just old guys. So I'm gonna have to say that I think Kid Rock would win, and I think he'd probably fight quite dirty. Aaron Garcia asks, how many teeth do you have? I have all of them. I have 30, so I have my 28 normal ones, and then I also have both of my wisdom teeth still. I'm not sure why you wanted to know that, Aaron, but there you are. Josh Seddon asks, will there be any time-based pedals, reverb, delay in the future? Yes, as I've kind of previously said, there will definitely be something coming out to replace the tape deck and the Exosphere, which have unfortunately gone end of line, but we'll be doing something that's hopefully more in line with the Junipero, and something that's a bit more in depth and gives you more options and stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely something coming. Watch this space. Josh also asks, are you planning on doing any more collabs in future? Yeah, so we've done 2 so far. So we've done the Avalanche Soda with Ray Gun Effects, and then the recently dropped The Brew with Champion Lecky. Currently not in talks with anyone, but absolutely open to doing some more stuff. It's really fun working with other builders and kind of seeing how our kind of pedals can work together, and it's just fun to work on those little limited run projects. Claude asks, bad amp and a great guitar or vice versa? I would have to go for a bad amp, because I have never really, out of the many amps that I've played, never really found an amp that I couldn't at least get a half decent sound out of. Whereas I have definitely played some guitars that are completely unplayable and just uncomfortable in every way to play. So I'd rather have a nice playing guitar into a bad amplifier. Taylor asks, power supplies versus batteries. This is a bit of a touchy subject for me, because I despise the unnecessary use of batteries, which is why I don't put any battery snaps in any of our pedals. It's just really wasteful, and I can't get behind it. And I think anyone that's pushing you to use batteries specifically because of some perceived difference in tone is frankly just pushing snake oil, and I have really no interest in supporting it. Jake Schneider asks, what famous pedal do you wish you had designed, and how would you improve it? I think we've already kind of done this, in that I really wish I had designed the original Big Muff pedal. I think it's a crazy circuit, and for as kind of as simple as it is, it's just one of those revolutionary circuits that everyone knows about. Everyone's owned a version of it at one point in their playing career, and I think whereas for a lot of people, like the Fuzz Face or the Tone Bender is their kind of holy grail of circuits, I think for me the Big Muff is, I think it's just brought so much of the music that I really love has been made by bands that use pedals like that, like Smashing Pumpkins and Dinosaur Jr. And for me, it's the ultimate pedal, and I really wish that I had come up with the original. But I think that we have given justice to the circuit with some of the tweaks and the additional stuff that we've added to pedals like the American Geek and the Seaver. And that is it. Thank you so much for the questions you sent in. Really enjoy answering the stuff that you guys want to know. Like I said, I'm hoping that we can try and make this a semi-regular thing, because it's really fun for me to do these little things, because it doesn't really require, I just sit in front of the camera for half an hour and answer these questions. It's not not any skin off my nose. So drop us a like or a comment, subscribe if you like the content that we're putting out, and we will see you next time.